All right, so today we're going to be talking about Chapter 5, Lesson 1. It's called Lines. First line we're going to talk about is called a transversal. And when we look at a diagram like this, I and K are parallel lines, where line L cuts across those two. You can see that it creates four different sets of angles here, or two different sets of angles that have four in each one. This line is called a transversal. And a transversal or transverse line is a line that intersects two parallel lines. Now, obviously, if we create two different sets of angles, there's going to be a set of angles that's in between the two parallel lines, and a set of angles that are not in between those two. They're outside of those two parallel lines. So, interior angles, these are angles that lie inside or between the two parallel lines. And examples of these lines would be 3, 4, 5, and 6 because they appear between the two parallel lines. So angle 3, angle 4, angle 5, angle 6. Now, exterior angles are the exact same thing. The only difference is they lie outside the two parallel lines. Examples of those would then be 1, 2, 7, and 8. Now we're going to start getting into some different angles here. And these sets of angles are actually a little bit more special. So alternate interior angles are interior angles on opposite sides of the transversal. And these are special. They come in pairs. And these pairs are congruent, which means they're equal to each other. So if we look at this, 4 and 6 are alternate interior angles. They're on opposite sides of the transversal, and they're both inside or between the two parallel lines. So some examples would be angle 4 and angle 6. They come in a pair, and those two angles are congruent to each other. They're equal to each other. Another example would be 3 and angle 7, angle 5. Because 3 and 5 are both interior, they're on opposite sides of this transverse line. Now, exterior angles that are alternate. Exactly the same thing. These are exterior angles on opposite sides of the transversal. Again, these also come in pairs. And the pairs, again, are congruent. Examples would be 1 and 7. That's a pair of alternate exterior angles. And the other pair would be 2 and 8. Now, with alternate interior and alternate exterior angles, we can abbreviate them as AI, and A, E, A. Those are some abbreviations that we can use. Now, corresponding angles are a little bit more difficult to understand. But these are angles that are in the same position. But in the different group. Again, these also come in pairs.
Brooke, Craig and Britt, please come to the office. Brooke, Craig and Britt, please come to the office. Thank you.
And these pairs are congruent. So, for example, we're going to look at purple here now for a color. This is one group. This is another group. 1 and 5 are in the exact same position. So 1 and 5 are corresponding angles. Go back up here again. 2 and 6 are in the exact same position in different groups. Same thing with 3 and 7, and then 4 and 8. These we can't abbreviate because CA, we're going to learn that those also could be talking about complementary angles. And those angles we learned about in 7th grade, but we're going to review them quickly here. All right, so example 1, classify these two pairs of angles. So with A, that's 1 and 7. Here's the transversal. Here are the two parallel lines. They're exterior angles on opposite sides of that transversal line, which means these are alternate exterior angles. Letter B, angle 2 and 8, they're both inside the parallel lines on opposite sides of the transversal, which means these are alternate interior angles. All right, let's talk about some review. So we have supplementary, complementary, and vertical angles. So supplementary angles, these are two angles whose sum is 180 degrees. One way that you can remember it is S and straight angle both start with S, or supplementary and straight angle both start with S, because supplementary angles form a straight angle. Complementary angles are two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. This one's a little bit more difficult to remember unless you remember that supplementary is 180, so then you can remember that complementary is 90. And last but of course not least is vertical angles. Vertical angles are kind of tricky to understand and remember, but vertical angles, they are formed when two lines intersect. They come in pairs. They are congruent. And vertical angles, for example, if these are my two lines, this angle here and that angle there are vertical. And then the blue are another pair of vertical lines. So they share a vertex, but not a side. If they did share a side, they would be adjacent angles. So they share a vertex, but they do not share a side. All right, example 2 then. Now we're going to be finding a missing angle measure. So Mr. Adams installed the gate shown. This is kind of dark to see, but I'm going to kind of highlight.
Dane Shepke, please get a hold of Ryan before you leave. Thank you.
I'm going to show the different angles here. So this one here is 1. This is 1. This is 2. This is 3. This one here is 4. Then we have 5. Here's 7 down here. This is 8, which makes this one 6. So it says line C is parallel to line D. So this is C. That's D. If measure of angle 4, that's this one right here, is 40 degrees, find the measure of angle 6, which is right here, and angle 7, which is right here, and justify your answer. So first of all, here's 7, or here's 4, and here's 6. These two angles are alternate interior angles, which means they're congruent. So the measure of angle 6 is 40 degrees because angle 4 and angle 6 are alternate interior angles. Next one now, we want to find out what measure of angle 7 is. Now, unfortunately, 4 and 7 don't form a relationship. They don't have anything to do with each other. But 6 and 7 do. In fact, they form a straight angle. They're supplementary, which means that the measure of angle 7 is 140 degrees because we want this plus this to equal 180. So we know then that a measure of angle 7 is 140 degrees because 6 is 40, and angle 6 and angle 7 are supplementary angles. All right, that is the end of lesson 1. If you have any questions, please let me know.